It's another weekend, and the first for a while, without any Formula 1 or IndyCar. That left me in a bit of a tough spot when it came to finding a video to make this time around, and as entertaining as it would be to cover Le Mans and the adventures of my new favourite driver, Owen Bastard, the FIA have stepped in and pissed everyone off again. Now I appreciate that the name Andrea Kimi Antonelli is one that's already been rammed so far down our throats it's coming out of our asses, but in fairness, there's pretty good reason for that. I've already outlined the Italian's numerous accolades when I last covered the 17-year-old a month ago. Back then, he was being lined up as a potential mid-season replacement for the 69th Amendment here, and while that was at least one of my takes that's aged well so far in 2024, there was always one great big problem with it. Antonelli is 17, which at the time of that video broke the FIA super license rules, which state that a driver must hold a driving license and be at least 18 years of age to compete in Formula 1. That legislation has been in place ever since Red Bull hired a particularly impressive fetus in 2015, who, in fairness, appears to have gone on to do rather well. But even if Antonelli was only slated for a practice session or two, he'd need a fake ID to make that happen. That was all until June the 14th, 2024, where the FIA announced that they'd made an adjustment to Appendix L of their sporting code. No, seriously, that is the correct letter, I'm not just taking the piss. The additional clause to Appendix L states the following. At the sole discretion of the FIA, a driver judged to have recently and consistently demonstrated outstanding ability and maturity in a single-seater Formula car competition may be granted a super license at the age of 17 years old. This, of course, would allow Antonelli to secure a Formula 1 drive, in theory, as soon as the very next race in Spain. Now, while that is incredibly unlikely and the FIA never mentioned him by name, it would appear this addition to the FIA sporting code is practically written for the Italian. It begs the very obvious question over where he would go, which has a very obvious answer in Logan Sargent. That move makes sense if Mercedes are adamant they want to sign Antonelli to the factory team in 2025, as the contention for a second spot alongside Alex Albon now appears to be between Carlos Sainz and James Vowles' wank rag. Placing Kimi into that Williams is a huge risk though, especially when you consider he's still not scored a podium in F2, and Williams are doing their best to keep their crash damage to a minimum this year. On the other side of the coin, he won't be completely wet behind the ears when he steps into whatever unstable shopping trolley the Silver Arrows produce next year, and I'm pretty certain he'll be a better driver than Sargent. I said all that in my last video anyway, so let's get back to the title of this one. And why does it piss people off? Well, besides the fact that giving money to charity can even do that nowadays, consider this an FP1 crossover episode, as we're headed off to the world of IndyCar. 3 of the drivers on their current crash-happy grid have been linked to F1 seats in recent memory. A couple of years back, the sport's highest earner, Colton Herta, was being lined up for a drive at AlphaTauri, whilst Pato O'Ward and Alex Palou have also found themselves in the running for a potential spot at McLaren. None of the 3 ever made it to the pinnacle of motorsport, however, and the big argument is, where exactly was their special dispensation? Well, they're all very different cases, so let's break them down one at a time. We'll start with Herta, who arguably out of the 3 made the most noise when he was in contention for what eventually became Nick De Vries' drive at AlphaTauri in 2023. For non-IndyCar viewers, I think it's fair to say the American's arrival into the series very much mirrored that of Max Verstappen in Formula 1. Coming into the sport at only 18, winning early on, and then spending the next few years hitting as many things as he could find. Now, while Herta is arguably still in that phase of his career, with the 2023 calendar featuring 3 races in the States, the appeal of a home driver would be a boon to any Formula 1 team. There was just one issue. Herta didn't qualify for the all-important super license, and while special dispensation was requested, the FIA turned around and told Red Bull to jump off a cliff. If you spent any time on Twitter over the last couple of days, firstly, God help you, and secondly, this is likely the situation you've heard this current Antonelli palaver compared to. But in reality, both are very different. At the age of 22, Herta would have been old enough to qualify for that super license at the time. Problem was, he didn't meet the other big requirement, the 40 all-important super license points. These points are awarded to where you place in FIA-recognised series, with more awarded to those higher up the motorsport ladder and to the individuals highest up the driver's standings. To make matters more complicated, points expire after 3 years, and at that all-important time in 2022, Herta just sat on 32 of them. This is because, whilst IndyCar represents the top flight level of American single-seater racing, the FIA view it as a steaming hot pile of shit for some reason. awarding less points to drivers in that series compared to even the likes of Formula 3 in some cases. Herta had attempted to race in F3 or even Formula Regional to overcome this, except the FIA cottoned onto that as well and told the American to just go f*** himself. While this did little to improve their already dwindling popularity at the time, given that Herta has continued to be the bottle of all bottle jobs since, maybe it was just a good thing this happened. Plus, we now have Daniel Ricciardo on the grid, and everyone's loving that right now, aren't they? Returning to Antonelli though, when he currently sits on 67 super license points. So really, this is a completely different situation. Should IndyCar be viewed much higher by the FIA though? Well, of course it bloody should, but that's a rant for a completely separate video. Let's move on to O'Ward then. The McLaren test driver has made brief appearances in the F1 driver market conversation over the last couple of years, causing quite the stir when he stepped into an F2 car for a banned Regunnathon in 2019. Having driven for our McLaren's IndyCar squad since 2020, O'Ward's consistently still found himself below that 40-point threshold for Formula 1. And while a P4 finish in the championship last year finally pushed him across the line, it was just too little too late. McLaren had Norris and Piastri signed to long-term deals, and with that lineup going from strength to strength, there was never any room for O'Ward in that team to begin with, condemning the Mexican to race alongside Santino Ferrucci for the rest of his days. The other thing perhaps holding him back was his tendency to turn into a bit of a terrorist, though that doesn't apply to the final man on this list, Alex Palou, who again was linked with McLaren and perhaps a few other teams on the grid, except he f***ed his chances all on his own. While Herta and O'Ward sit as, say, the Charles Leclercs of IndyCar, having a ton of potential but no actual championships under their belt, Palou was a completely different story, blasting onto the scene in 2020, moving to frontrunners Chip Ganassi in 2021, and taking the series championship on the second time of asking. He would dominate the series again in 2023, putting the Spaniard right on the map for a potential Formula 1 drive if a team came calling, and came calling they did. Alex Palou signed a deal with McLaren in 2022, under the pretense that he'd be competing for a potential Formula 1 seat in the near future. There were two problems with this though. Firstly, his existing Chip Ganassi outfit claimed ownership over him as well, and McLaren were telling every driver they could find that they could have a Formula 1 car if they signed on the dotted line. Cue a ton of controversy, which saw Palou eventually agree to stay at Chip Ganassi for one more year, whilst testing F1 machinery with McLaren and taking part in free practice sessions for the Woking squad. It was at this point though that Piastri was signed, and Alex saw the truth that he'd never make it to F1 with the Papaya team. And since he was doing rather well in his final season with Ganassi, he decided to play contract wars again. While Palou may have been spared the flames first time round, the way he went about cutting his ties with McLaren saw the Spaniard tainted with the back of Zak Brown's hand. The backlash was severe, and though he'd still go on to take the series title in 2023, no one has mentioned his name in relation to a Formula 1 drive since. That's a shame, as Palou likely presented IndyCar's best chance to show the world the true calibre of its competition. But as I said before, this was entirely Alex's fault on this one. But getting back to the point, should we be pissed off with the FIA for allowing special dispensation for Kimi Antonelli when no help was awarded to some of IndyCar's most promising prospects in the past? Well, I think we can hate the FIA for a lot of things, but not this one. The three case studies in IndyCar were wildly different to what we're seeing with the Italian Messiah right here, right now, and in the end, we're likely getting pissed over what will just turn out to be a handful of free practice session appearances, ahead of potentially a full race drive in 2025, where Kimi would have met all the original requirements anyway. There are far more important things we could be complaining about, so direct your anger elsewhere, like Lance Stroll's F1 seat, or the Pit Stop Boys comment section. Let's just all get a little perspective. Anyway, let me know what you think of this whole situation, and whether you'd like to see Kimi in either FP1s or a full race program with a team later this year. I'm sure you'll find someone to argue with in the comments down below. And while you're at it, if you enjoyed the video and want to hear even more from me, drop this one a like and get subscribed to the channel. A final thank you goes out to all my patrons and channel members who get access to this one early, and if that interests you or you just want to further support me, then you can head over to the links in the description down below. I'll be back very soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.